If you love that fresh, spontaneous look to watercolour, here are 2 practical tips that you can try today that will help you loosen up your painting and make the whole process much more enjoyable. My first suggestion is to use more water and to let the water do a lot of the work. I always like to say it's the water that puts the magic in watercolour, but it can also be the thing that makes it a little bit more scary. Because it introduces an element of unpredictability. But if you're after that fresh, spontaneous look, that's exactly what you want. So I say, don't be so afraid of the water, embrace it. By the way, if loosening up your watercolour painting is something that you're working on at the moment, you might like my free guide, which has got all my best tips on how to go about this. Let me show you the way I like to start. Once I've put down a very light pencil sketch, and it's only a couple of lines just to show me where the main elements are going to be, I like to start with clean water on my brush and splash in a little water here and there. I'm not carefully trying to place the water in any particular areas, but of course, if there's something that you want to paint very carefully, you can leave that area dry. But if you're going for fresh spontaneity, I would just randomly splatter in a little bit of water and have that be the first start that sets you up in the right frame of mind. Now we know that when we put a paint mark down onto an area of the paper that is wet, that paint is going to spread out, the pigments will travel in the water. And that's really something I love to watch. It's really why I paint. It's just to watch that happen. But what I particularly enjoy about this approach is that you get a natural variation in your colours. Even just using one colour on your brush, you're going to have different tones. You're going to have it much paler where the paint has made contact with the water, and you're going to have crisp, bold marks where you happen to have put down the mark on a dry section of the paper. And I think this is so much more effective when you don't really know where that's going to happen, because you can't always see where the water is on your page. Now, don't forget, water also makes our colours paler because it spreads out those pigments and lets more of the white paper show through. So if you have a lot of water and not much pigment, you're going to end up with a bit of a wishy-washy looking painting at the end. So remember to be bold with your colour as well. You want lots of juicy colour. So it's really abundance all round. An abundance of water and an abundance of juicy colour is really, I think, the perfect recipe for a nice, fresh, colourful, splashy painting. I really like the way you get this combination of hard and soft edges in your painting. You'll have hard edges where you've put down your mark on the dry paper, and you'll have a soft edge where the mark meets a damp section of the paper. Variety is a very important ingredient in our paintings. My second suggestion is to try doing the whole painting with one large brush. You really don't need a tiny brush at all. I always find that those really tiny brushes suck you into the details and tend to force you into making a much tighter painting than you ever wanted to. If you go for a nice big soft round brush, you'll find it makes such a wide variety of marks. Do some experimenting and figure out just what you can do with that brush. When you push the whole belly into the page, you can make a big, fat, juicy mark that spreads out, and you'll get a nice, random, sort of organic shape. And then if you pull the brush onto its very tip, you can make very fine marks. So you can get a whole spectrum of broad and very fine detailed marks just out of that one brush. I also think there's a huge advantage to not be worrying about whether you need to switch brushes at any point. If you've got a whole selection of brushes in front of you, it's created a whole raft of extra decisions for you. Decisions take up a lot of energy, and you want to save that energy for your painting. So stick to the one brush, and you'll be surprised what you can do with it. In the little sweet peas that I'm painting here, you can see that I have managed to create big broad marks with the brush, but also the very fine marks for those stems, and all with that one brush. We all love talking about brushes and trying to figure out what they do. I do have a separate video all about brushes. So if you're wondering if you've got the best brush for you, or wondering if you need to add to your stash and how you can make the brush work for you, you might want to watch that video next. I'll pop a link up in the cards. Now, I said I was going to give you 2 tips, but here's a bonus one. My third tip for loosening up your painting is to try not to fuss. Put your mark down and leave it alone. Wait and see what happens. As the pigments move and settle, you might find that your image starts to come to life on the paper, especially if you're painting something like these lovely sweet peas. As the pigments are settling, I'm noticing little edges that look to me like they could be the edge of a petal. And I do like to take the tip of my brush and the same color that I was painting with before and put in a little bit more of that edge to refine it a little. And then I soften it off, again, using my very same big soft round brush. You'll be surprised how few details you need to just suggest the edge of a petal for the whole image to make sense. I think it's a much more enjoyable and freeing way to paint, to be responding to what you see on your page. And it feels so much more creative to be pulling your image out of what happens on the page, rather than just trying to make a complete reproduction of whatever your reference happens to be. Just like we don't need to have exactly the same colors that we see, we really don't need to have the same petal edges in exactly the same places as they are in the reference, or indeed in real life if you happen to be lucky enough to have a little jar of sweet peas on your desk right now. By the way, if loosening up your watercolor painting is something that you're working on at the moment, you might like my free guide, which has got all my best tips on how to go about this. Using one brush for the entire painting is a wonderful way to simplify your painting process, and simplification is really key if you're wanting to go for that loose, fun approach. But there's more that we can do with simplification. It's not just the process. In fact, there's so much we can do to simplify our subject and figure out how to let go of some of those details. That's a whole separate video. I'll pop it up on the screen and you can watch that one next.